Look, I've been doing stand up for 8 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything. Hecklers who throw more than just insults, club owners who think exposure pays rent, and audiences so dead, I've had to check for pulses. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened when I rented the old Victorian mansion on Hollow Street. I'm Marcus, by the way, 32 years old, professional joke teller, and apparently the first black man in history dumb enough to move into a haunted house on purpose. But hey, at $300 a month, I wasn't about to let a little thing like supernatural activity keep me from finally having space to work on my material. The landlord, a nervous white guy who kept glancing at me like he was waiting for me to change my mind, mumbled something about previous tenants not staying long. I figured he meant the rent was cheap because the place needed work. You know, normal stuff, leaky pipes, drafty windows, maybe some questionable electrical wiring from the Coolidge administration. What I didn't expect was a roommate who'd been dead for nearly a century. It started on my third night. I was up late in what used to be the library, working on new material about dating apps, you know, trying to find the humor in getting ghosted by actual living people. The irony of that wasn't lost on me later. Anyway, I'm sitting there when I hear this humming, not your typical someone's doing dishes humming, but the kind of melody that makes you stop and think, damn, Spotify's algorithms are getting really specific. Being a comedian means you're naturally curious about weird stuff. It's occupational hazard number one, right after tendency to overshare personal trauma for laughs. So I follow the sound down the hall toward what the landlord called the ballroom, which I'd been using as storage for my comedy props and an exercise bike I pretend to use. That's when I saw her. Y'all, I have been to some wild places. I've performed in dive bars where the rats had better stage presence than the headliner. I've done sets in basements where the audience was literally underground. But nothing prepared me for seeing a woman dancing alone in the moonlight, glowing like she was lit by the world's most expensive ring light. She was wearing a 1920s dress that hugged every curve like it was personally tailored by angels. And when she spun across that floor, I swear I heard jazz music that wasn't there. This woman had a figure that would make a preacher forget his sermon, curves that belonged in a museum, and an ass so perfectly shaped it could have been sculpted by Michelangelo if he'd had better taste and a serious appreciation for black women. Wait, did I mention she was black? Because she was. A beautiful, elegant black woman with skin that seemed to glow from within and movements that flowed like liquid poetry. Now, most people would have run screaming. Hell, most black people would have been out that door so fast we'd leave cartoon dust clouds. You know the rule. Black folks don't play with ghosts, demons, or anything that goes bump in the night. We see a door closed by itself. We're getting the hell out. But me, I'm standing there like an idiot, watching this gorgeous ghost dance, and the first thing out of my mouth is, "You're beautiful." Real smooth, Marcus. Real smooth. I've got a whole arsenal of material about pickup lines, and that's what I lead with to a supernatural entity. She stopped dancing and turned to look at me, and I'm telling you, her eyes were like looking into starlight. For a moment, that felt longer than my last relationship. We just stared at each other. Then she gasped, sounded like wind chimes having an existential crisis, and vanished. I spent the rest of the night trying to convince myself I'd been hallucinating from too much coffee and not enough sleep. But the next morning, I found myself at the local library, asking the librarian about my house's history. Mrs. Henderson, a sweet old white lady who probably had recipes older than my grandfather, gave me a look that said I wasn't the first person to come asking these questions. "Oh, the Whitmore place," she said, pulling out a book that looked like it predated electricity. "Built in 1895 by Theodore Whitmore for his daughter Evangeline. She was a beautiful colored girl." I winced. "We say black now, Mrs. Henderson." "Of course, dear. She was a beautiful black woman, known for her dancing and her substantial figure. The society pages couldn't stop talking about her, though not always kindly." I leaned in like I was about to get the tea of the century. "What happened to her?" "Tragic love story. She fell in love with a jazz musician, a black man, which was scandalous enough in those days. Her father was progressive enough to adopt a black daughter, but not progressive enough to let her marry who she chose. He locked her in the house to keep them apart. She died of a broken heart in 1924, and they say she's been dancing in that ballroom ever since. So, she's definitely a ghost. As ghostly as they come, though from what I hear, she's lovely company if you don't mind the whole being dead for 90 years aspect." That evening, I did something that would have made my mother call an intervention. I went back to that ballroom with flowers, white roses from the overgrown garden, because if you're going to shoot your shot with a ghost, you better come correct. At midnight, because apparently the supernatural operates on very specific scheduling, she appeared again. This time, she looked more solid, more real. "Evangeline," I called out, trying to sound casual instead of like a man having a conversation with thin air. She stopped dancing and stared at me with those incredible eyes. You know my name. I know your story. I know you've been waiting almost a century for your man to come back." I stepped closer, my heart doing gymnastics that would make Simone Biles jealous. "But maybe it's time to consider that the universe sent you someone better." She tilted her head, studying me. "You're not afraid of me?" I laughed because, honestly, what else was I going to do? "Afraid? Lady, I perform comedy for a living. I've faced crowds that could make a grown man cry. You're beautiful, you're elegant, and you haven't heckled me once. You're already ahead of most of my audiences." She smiled then, and I swear that smile could have ended wars and started new ones. "You think I'm beautiful? Are you serious right now? You're absolutely stunning. I mean, I've seen beautiful women. I live in a world with Lupita Nyong'o and Issa Rae. But you're something else entirely. The way you move, that dress, your whole everything. You're like if grace and beauty had a baby, and that baby grew up to break hearts professionally." She laughed, a sound like music and mischief having a party. The society pages used to say I was too curvaceous for proper dancing, said I was unseemly. Then the society pages were run by idiots with no taste and probably some serious vision problems, I said firmly. "You move like every song ever written was composed just for you. Every curve, every step. It's like watching poetry come alive." She moved closer, and I felt this gentle coolness, like standing in front of an open refrigerator on a hot day, but in the best way possible. "I've been alone for so long, Marcus, dancing the same dance, waiting for Thomas to return. But you see me differently. I see a woman who deserves to be celebrated, not hidden away like some secret. I see someone who could light up any room just by walking into it." I held out my hand. "Want to dance with me?" She looked at my hand, then back at me with an expression caught between hope and uncertainty. "I should warn you, I'm not exactly solid. This might be weird." Weird is my specialty. I once did a whole set about trying to explain Bitcoin to my grandmother. I can handle a little supernatural awkwardness. When she took my hand, I felt electricity shoot through me like I'd been struck by the world's most pleasant lightning bolt. We started moving together, and with each step, she seemed to become more real, more there. Tell me about yourself, I said as we swayed to her humming. The real you, not what those society page fools wrote. I loved books, she said, her voice getting stronger, especially poetry and stories about people like us. I wanted to write, to travel, to dance in real jazz clubs where nobody cared that a black woman had curves. What else? She spun under my arm with a grin that could have powered the city. I used to sneak out to hear jazz music. That's where I met Thomas. Dancing to his music made me feel free, like I could be myself instead of what everyone expected me to be. Those people were idiots, I said. You're incredible exactly as you are. Over the next few weeks, I developed the most unusual routine of my life. Days were for writing jokes and pretending to be a normal person. Nights were for falling completely, utterly, and probably foolishly in love with a ghost who made me laugh harder than my own material and whose every movement was like watching magic happen in real time. Evangeline was brilliant, sharp, funny, with timing that would make veteran comedians weep with envy. She told me about the stories she'd created in her mind during the long years of waiting, about her dreams of becoming a writer. I need to tell you something, I said one night as we sat on the window seat, trying to figure out the logistics of interdimensional dating. You're secretly married to a living person? She asked with mock horror. Worse, I'm falling in love with you. Like, write terrible poetry about your eyes kind of love. Her whole form shimmered with emotion. Marcus, you make me feel more alive than I ever felt when I was actually breathing. You see me, really see me, not just as some tragic ghost story. There's got to be a way, I said, taking her hands and trying not to think about how impossible this whole situation was. Some way for us to be together for real. I refuse to believe the universe has jokes this cruel. She was quiet for a moment, then her eyes lit up. My grandmother, my real grandmother, before the Whitmores adopted me, she used to say love was the strongest magic in the world. That true love could cross any boundary, even death itself. Your grandmother sounds like she knew what she was talking about. She said if two souls were meant to be together, love would find a way to unite them, no matter what stood between them. I stood up and pulled her into my arms, and suddenly she felt completely solid, completely real. Then, let's see if your grandmother was right. I kissed her, and it was like every romantic movie moment that I'd ever made jokes about, except it was happening to me, and it was beautiful and terrifying and perfect all at once. Light surrounded us, getting brighter and brighter, until I was sure we were either about to achieve enlightenment or get vaporized. When I opened my eyes, I was holding a very real, very warm, very much alive woman. Evangeline stared at her solid hands in amazement. How is this possible? Apparently, your grandmother knew her stuff, I said, grinning like I just killed at the Apollo. Love really is magic. She threw her arms around me, and we both started laughing like people who just won the supernatural lottery. I have 90 years of living to catch up on, she said. Lucky for you, I'm an excellent tour guide. Plus, I've got strong opinions about everything from social media to modern music, and you're going to love pizza. You're amazing, she said, giving me a playful push. And you're the most incredible woman I've ever met, living or dead. Every gorgeous, perfect, absolutely stunning inch of you. As the sun came up on our first morning as two living people, I thought about how my life had just taken the most unexpected turn possible. I'd moved to this house looking for space to work on my comedy, and instead, I'd found the love of my life and enough material for a Netflix special. 6 months later, we got married in the same ballroom where we'd met. Small ceremony, just close friends, and Mrs. Henderson, who'd become like a grandmother to Evangeline and the source of the best stories about her ghostly years. As we had our first dance as husband and wife, Evangeline whispered, "Thank you for seeing me, Marcus, for really seeing who I am." "Thank you for being worth seeing," I whispered back, spinning her around. "And thank you for giving me the best love story I've ever been part of." She kissed me right there in front of everyone, and I realized that sometimes the best things in life come from the most impossible places. Even if that place is a haunted Victorian mansion with a ghost who's got moves that could make professional dancers quit their day jobs. After all, I'm a comedian. I know a good punchline when I see one, and this was the best punchline of my life.